I don't know how long it lasted, but the feeling of ecstasy eventually began to fade. It was replaced by panic as I tried to hold on to the last shreds of the incredible happiness. It was impossible, though, and I was left feeling empty and hollow. My head snapped towards the stoners zoning out in the room. There was no indication that they had registered that anything had happened. They were so far gone that I could have set them on fire and they wouldn't have noticed. I looked down at the razor blade on the floor next to the dead woman's neck. Retrieving it, I slowly stood up and moved towards the nearest of the addicts. It was a rail-thin man with pale skin and countless needle marks across both of his arms. For the first time, I felt a twinge of unease. This was somehow different than killing either Jesse or Tracy. This person was completely defenseless and hadn't done anything to set me off. I thought about the incredible high that had consumed me when I killed the drug dealer, though, and suddenly, nothing else mattered. I went down the line of addicts, slitting each throat one at a time. I would bask in the pleasure the killing brought with it for as long as possible, before moving on to the next person. After the third person, the razor became too dull and sick with blood to continue using. I searched around the kitchen until I located a sharp butcher knife. As I turned around to continue my work, I noticed an object on the counter next to the sink. I picked the gun up and looked at it curiously. Using it instead of a knife would certainly make the process easier, but I was hesitant to do so. I didn't know if shooting someone would still trigger the post-killing high. Deciding that it wasn't worth the risk of losing a potential fix, I set it back down and gripped the knife tightly. 2 hours later, I was standing over the final addict when I saw him begin to stir. His eyes started to flutter, and he licked his dry lips as he grunted. Before I could react, he started to try to stand up. He was much larger than the other people in the room, and if he managed to get his bearings and see what I had done, I wasn't sure that I'd be able to finish the job. Thinking quickly, I snatched up a nearby vase and smashed it as hard as I could against his temple. He fell back onto the couch, and I managed to slice the blade of the knife across his throat before he recovered. The sensations that came from the kill were even more intense than the others had been. I writhed on the floor, the warmth flashing through me like an electric current. The man had been the most difficult of the kills so far, and for some reason, that had made it even more satisfying. When it finally subsided, I pushed myself up off the floor and took a moment to collect myself. I was exhausted, and all that I wanted was to go home and pass out. Now that I was past my craving, though, I was beginning to realize the reality of my situation. There was a body waiting for me back in my trailer, and there were 7 others right in front of me. I needed to leave before someone else came by to make a purchase, and I couldn't go back home until I figured out what to do with Jesse. My mind was working through the situation with cold detachment. I still didn't feel any hint of guilt or remorse. In fact, each murder had been easier than the one before it, and at some point, I'd even stopped seeing them as human. They were simply what I needed to get my fix. That didn't mean that I wasn't worried, however. Where there were bodies, there would be the police. Maybe they would attribute the carnage I'd caused to an insane junkie or a rival drug dealer. It was also possible that they would perform a full and thorough investigation, and that they would find evidence that I had been there. If that happened, they would want to question me at the very least, and that could lead them to Jesse's body. The prospect of being arrested for multiple homicides was bad enough, but what worried me most was that whatever was causing me to have such powerful reactions would eventually wear off. I knew absolutely nothing about the remembrance I had taken, not even how long it would remain in my system. If there was one thing that I knew after years of using a wide variety of drugs, however, it was that the ride eventually stopped no matter how good the stuff was. I needed more remembrance, and unfortunately, there was only one place where I might be able to find some. I had to return to the store I had gotten it from. I was once again covered in blood, and this time, I wasn't at home to be able to get changed. I looked over at Tracy's body. Not into my own clothes, anyway. Quickly stripping down to my underwear, I washed the blood off my hands and face before digging around in the kitchen cabinets until I found a box of garbage bags. I packed my bloody garments into one of the bags and carried it over my shoulder as I searched the house for Doug's room. I found it on the second floor. When I opened the closet, I was relieved to see both shirts and pants hanging from the rack. The hooded sweatshirt and jeans that I chose were a few sizes too big, but they would have to do. Now that I was dressed, I left the house through the back door. I emerged into a weed-filled yard that obviously hadn't been tended to in quite a while. I made sure that none of the neighbors were watching before I threw the trash bag over the far side fence and climbed over after it. Retrieving the bag, I hurried down the block, hoping that I would go unnoticed until I reached my destination. I managed to make it to the small grocery store that stood at the edge of downtown. I had approached it from the rear, and I was able to cross the distance to a blue dumpster without incident. It was roughly half full, which was perfect for my needs. I tossed the garbage bag inside and moved a few of the other items around to cover it. I nodded to myself. Just another piece of trash. Dark clouds were gathering in the sky as the storm started to roll in. Hoping that the antique store wasn't already closed, I walked down the sidewalk, the hood from my sweatshirt pulled up over my head. A number of people passed me going in the opposite direction without so much as glancing at me. Each time I thought about how incredible it would feel to kill them right then and there. I reached the antique store and stopped at the door. The sign was still displaying open, and I knew that I needed to go inside. The problem was that I had been banned from doing so earlier that same day. I blinked. Had it really been less than a day since I had gotten my hands on Remembrance? That seemed impossible. I jumped slightly as the store door opened. The owner was standing directly in front of me, her expression unreadable as she looked down at me. I took an involuntary step backwards. There was something about the woman that intimidated me. I hated feeling that way. Nobody intimidated me, and yet, she did with just a look. "Come in," Kane said, stepping aside to allow me to pass. I hesitated before crossing through the doorway. She closed the door behind me and changed the open sign to closed. Taking a large key out of her pocket, she locked the door and flipped off the switch to the right of the frame. The lights in the front of the store turned off, casting a gloom over the items on display. "I see that you went against my instructions and took more than 3 drops," she observed dryly. "If there's one thing that you can count on an addict to do, it's to always want more." "I need more remembrance," I said, ignoring the thinly veiled insult. "I can pay." "It doesn't matter if you have the money or not. There isn't any to be had. I gave you my only bottle." "You have to know where to get more." She raised an eyebrow. "You're assuming that there's more out there to be procured. Remembrance is one of the rarest substances in the world." I felt a twinge of panic. "What about the person you said made it? The chemist or whatever? Can they make you more?" The store owner didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slowly walked to the other side of the store and retrieved something from a high shelf. Whatever it was wrapped in soft black cloth and was about the size of her forearm. "Remembrance isn't a typical drug," Kane told me as she came back over. "It's quite parasitic in nature. As I said, there isn't any more. The only way to trigger the effects now is through the other method that, judging by the blood under your fingernails, you've already discovered." I regarded her in surprise, my mouth moving but no words coming out as I looked down at my nails. "There's a very good reason that I told you to only use 3 drops, the woman continued. Doing so causes you to experience old happy memories with vivid clarity, but it also doesn't cause a permanent change in you. The effects, while quite strong, are temporary. But when I took 4 drops, I trailed off. You've caught on. Good. 4 drops in one dose changes you. It rewrites you, makes you into someone else, something else. I swallowed hard. Am I going to die? She waited a moment before answering. Not as long as you either continue on your little killing spree or take a very specific antidote, which I just happen to have on hand. Tell me, did you kill your first victim before or after you had taken the 4-drop dose? Before, I replied automatically, immediately realizing what I had admitted to. Wait, fuck, I mean... Before, she repeated, ignoring my feeble backpedaling. After a normal dose, correct? It's very rare for someone to be that compatible. The euphoria you experience after killing, it must be indescribable. Not trusting myself to speak, I didn't answer. It's beginning to rain, Kane observed. I looked over my shoulder at the front windows. Droplets of water were splattering against the glass. It wasn't coming down hard yet, but judging from the sky, it wouldn't be long before that changed. It's going to be one hell of a storm, Kane commented lightly. Oh well, back to the matter at hand. Shall I go get the antidote? It's still soon enough for it to reverse what's happening to you. You'll be able to continue living without killing, although you'll no longer be able to achieve the, shall we say, highs you have experienced today. No, I practically screamed. No, I can't do that. I need it. The woman grinned broadly. I thought that would be your answer. What are the lives of the sheep compared to the desires of the wolf, correct? And you, my dear, have all the potential in the world to be a wolf. She handed me the object that she was holding. I took it from her in confusion, not sure what she was getting at. I slowly unwrapped the cloth and found that inside was a wooden box. It was intricately carved, and the wood was smooth to the touch. I opened the lid. The box contained a series of knives, each a different shape and size, but all with the same ivory handle. So, Mr. Bennington, Kane said slowly as she reached over to lift one of the knives out of the box, let's get you fit for something perfect. It is, after all, almost time to feed your addiction.